For more than a century, freak shows captivated, shocked, and scared audiences, presenting individuals with weird physical traits. From conjoined twins to real-like giants, these performers were both exploited and celebrated, transforming their differences into an income. Yet behind the dark curtain, their lives were often far more complicated than the spectacle revealed. Who were these real-life circus freaks, and what became of them? Let's uncover the incredible and sometimes tragic histories of the 15 most terrifying circus freaks that actually existed. Number 15. Doleta Boyin. Doleta was born in 1881 in Illinois, and she had a name that sounded like it was crafted for the circus spotlight. They called her Dolly Dodd, and with good reason. She stood just over 2 feet tall and carried herself like a queen. Known as the world's smallest mother, Doleta had 2 conventionally sized children by cesarean section and proudly posed with them for promotional photos. Her first husband was Major Boyin, another little person, but her second was 6 feet tall, the Roper Cherokee Buck, who left bearded Lady Baroness de Barksey to be with her. Doleta didn't just live a wild story, she owned it. She performed in sideshows for years, always managing to draw a crowd, not just for her size, but for her personality. When she died in 1948 in Joplin, Missouri, she had built a life out of bold choices and spectacle. In an industry built on wonder, Doleta Boyin was the real deal, small in frame, towering in legend. Number 14. Stony St. Clair. Leonard, better known as Stony, was born in 1912 in rural West Virginia. A childhood bout of rheumatic arthritis left him disabled by age 4, but it didn't take his hands or his hunger. By 15, he'd joined the circus as a sword swallower. By 20, he'd found his true canvas in tattooing. Confined to a wheelchair but never to silence, Stony became one of the most well-known tattoo artists of his era. He opened his first shop in Tampa, then moved through New Orleans, eventually landing in Columbus, Ohio. His sign read, "Stony Knows How," and people came from miles to sit under his buzzing needles. He taught the craft, talked non-stop, and left behind stories etched in both skin and folklore. He was featured in 2 documentaries, Stony Knows How and Tattoo Uprising, both testaments to a man who turned pain, art, and storytelling into a legacy. He didn't just ink bodies, he marked lives with permanence that goes beyond logic. Number 13. Monsieur Abahinn. Abahinn was born in Belgium in 1805 and grew into a man you physically couldn't ignore. Some said he was 7 feet tall, while others swore it was closer to 8. But whatever the height, the man filled a stage with his size and his presence. He wasn't just tall either. Abahinn could act, sing, lift ridiculous weights, and crack jokes while doing it. By the 1840s, he was a sensation across Europe, and later made his way to America to join Barnum's American Museum. He even threw hands with another giant, Colonel Goshen, mid-tour, until Barnum literally stopped the brawl just to sell tickets for a rematch. Off stage, though, his life wasn't so polished. His marriage ended in accusations of cruelty. And that fight with Goshen? Rumors of racism followed. Still, Abahinn kept performing, even supporting the Union during the Civil War. He died in 1873 and was buried in Brooklyn's Greenwood Cemetery, larger than life, even in death. Number 12. The Scandinavian Giant. Clifford Thompson was born in 1904 and grew into a man who looked like he could walk through clouds. Posters screamed he was 8 feet 7 inches tall, but truth put him closer to 7.5, still tall enough to turn heads everywhere he went. For 8 years, he worked the circus circuit with Al G. Barnes and later with Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey. But Clifford wasn't one to stay still. He moved into advertising, where his size helped sell milk, shoes, cars, and even beer. Then came law school. He got his degree and practiced for years, often called the tallest lawyer anyone had ever seen. Hollywood came calling too. He acted in films like Sealskins and Murder in the Private Car. Thompson craved validation, even publicly challenging Robert Wadlow for the tallest man title. Wadlow towered over him, and the moment stuck. Clifford died in 1955, remembered not for one career, but for chasing every single one. Number 11. Arthur Cravan and the Great Gamma. Arthur's real name was Fabian Avenarius Lloyd, but names barely scratched the surface. He was a poet, boxer, hoaxer, artist, performer, and a man who seemed to live entirely off chaos. Born in 1887 and nephew to Oscar Wilde, he bounced through Europe's art scene like a storm, publishing the outrageous magazine Maintenant, and pulling stunts that mixed truth with pure provocation. He once claimed Wilde was alive and had visited him, forged letters to match, and then challenged art critics to fistfights over bad reviews. During World War I, he fled Europe and staged a boxing match with Jack Johnson, calling himself European champion, which he wasn't. Jack knocked him out after 6 rounds. In 1917, he married artist Mina Loy, but the sea swallowed him a year later. He vanished during a storm. Meanwhile, on another continent, the Gamma was building a legacy of his own, through iron discipline, strength, and brutal wins in the ring. Number 10. Major Zamora. Nobody knows where Zamora came from or where he went, but when he performed, nobody forgot him. Just 32 inches tall, he ruled the dime museum circuit in the 1890s. They called him triple-jointed, claiming his body could bend and twist like an eel. And it kinda could. He'd slide into tight cabinets, crawl into boxes, and squeeze into specially made glass bottles while people lost their minds. His act earned him the nickname, the Human Octopus, and he played packed crowds on New York's Bowery before touring the country. In St. Louis, he met Tina Goffman, marketed as the world's smallest woman. She was a bit taller than him, but she married him anyway in 1893. And they became a duo both on stage and off. They toured together, 2 performers who turned their size into showbiz. Beyond that, he vanished into sideshow history. But for a moment, Major Zamora was the kind of act that made jaws drop and ticket lines grow. Number 9. Dick Hilburn. Dick Hilburn was born in North Carolina with only one fully developed limb, his right arm. But he made that arm into a legacy. Nicknamed the Quarter Man, he didn't ask for pity, applause, or permission. He built a life on his own terms, pushing himself across circus lots on a skateboard and turning crowds into believers. Dick ran his own traveling show and gave work to others like Carl Norwood, famously known as the Frog Boy. But he wasn't just a sideshow performer. He became a skilled tattoo artist and sign painter, using his single arm to support himself in an era where people like him were rarely seen as more than novelties. Dick didn't settle for survival. He created, he hustled, he thrived. When he passed away in 1971, people remembered the man, not just the body. His grit, his self-reliance, and his unwillingness to fold made him more than a performer. He became a symbol of raw resilience. Number 8. Colonel and Mrs. Reuben Steer. Reuben Allen Steer was born in 1838 in Gloucester, Rhode Island. By adulthood, he stood just 3 feet 8 inches tall and weighed only 43 pounds, but his presence was 10 times that. Promoted as colonel, he performed across the U.S. with Stone and Murray's Circus, Carl Stephen Bailey's show, and the Lilliputian Opera Company. In 1880, he married Rebecca Ann Myers, a fellow little person from Indiana, and the two became an inseparable act. They performed side by side for over 2 decades before retiring in 1906 to Cheapshay. But retirement didn't mean fading away. They opened a candy shop, ran a restaurant, and even raised poultry. Reuben took up a job as the town's truant officer, apparently with more fire than you'd expect from someone under 4 feet tall. He was known not just for performing under the big top, but for helping run a small-town life that mixed charm, hustle, and a whole lot of heart. He died in 1915. Number 7. Celesta Geyer. Celesta Herman, later known as Celesta Geyer, was born in Cincinnati and began gaining weight rapidly as a child. By the 6th grade, she weighed 150 pounds. By the end of high school, she was over 300. When her husband lost his job, she joined a traveling show, and Celesta became a sensation under names like Dolly Dimples and the world's most beautiful fat lady. She stood just under 5 feet tall and eventually reached 555 pounds. With Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, she toured in the 1930s and 1940s as a star. Then in 1950, she had a heart attack, and everything changed. She lost 443 pounds in a year, switched to baby food diets, and turned her health journey into a public platform. She wrote books, gave talks, and inspired crowds with her story. She lived decades longer, and in 2014 was finally honored in Coney Island's Sideshow Hall of Fame. Number 6. Pyramal Sammy. Pyramal Sammy was born in India in 1888 with a parasitic twin growing from his chest, a physical reality twisted into myth by circus promoters. They dressed the undeveloped body in a child's dress and presented the two as siblings, Pyramal and Sammy. It was an act built on discomfort and spectacle, and Sammy lived through all of it. He toured with his cousin Supramanian Munsamy, a little person, and was exhibited alongside others billed under cruel titles like Pinheads, Gondia, and Apexia. His time with Ringling Brothers between 1900 and 1915 brought money, but not belonging. He never connected with America, and many believe he hated the life he was forced into. Eventually, he returned to India, quietly walking away from the show that had sold his pain for applause. Pyramal Sammy's story is a dark reminder that the freak show era didn't just ignore dignity, it sold it, rewrote it, and left the real person buried beneath the costume. Number 5. The Alligator Girl. Esther Parnell was born in 1926 in Kenley with ichthyosis, a rare condition that made her skin dry, cracked, and scaly. By the 1940s, she and her brother Bill, who also had it, hit the sideshow circuit, promoted as the Alligator Twins. Her skin made crowds stare, but Esther turned it into a career. In 1947, she married a musician, Thomas Blackman, and the two launched their own act. A year later, she gave birth to her first child and began calling herself the world's strangest mother. She'd go on to raise 7 kids while still performing across the country. Esther worked until 1982, decades under the canvas tents. She even appeared in 2 horror movies, The Mutations and The Sentinel, where her skin became a literal movie feature. Esther died in 2003, not just remembered as a sideshow act, but as a mother who raised a full family on grit, stage lights, and a skin condition that never slowed her down. Now let's move to number 4, the vaudeville of Vale. Vale was born back in 1944 inside a Japanese-American internment camp, an origin that seemed to write his destiny in rebellion. His mother was Mary Takaoka of the vaudeville singing group the Taka Sisters, and his father, Conrad Yama, later became a well-known stage and screen actor. Growing up surrounded by music, performance, and resistance, Vale built his own path through words and noise. He launched the punk zine Search and Destroy, and later RE/Search publications, which exploded into the underground with titles like Modern Primitives, Pranks, and Incredibly Strange Films. He gave platforms to voices like John Waters, Henry Rollins, and Bell Hooks. Vale's work wasn't just publishing, it was punk philosophy, freak culture, and intellectual mischief in book form. Behind it all was a man shaped by war, show business, and outsider rage. Raised in the shadows of camps, jazz, and ink, Vale turned counterculture into a movement and printed the blueprint for the freak renaissance that followed. Number 3. The Human Owl. Martin Laurel, born Martin Emmerling, built a whole career off one disturbing skill. He could twist his head almost all the way around, snapping it backward like an owl. That eerie talent earned him the name the Human Owl, and he made sure everyone remembered it. He started in Europe before moving to the US in 1921, where Coney Island became his new stage. He eventually performed with Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, and Dick Best's Royal American shows. Crowds gasped. It looked unreal, and maybe it was. By the 1940s, Laurel was still at it, working Ripley's sideshows with oddballs like Popeye Perry and Little Junior Styles, also known as Lobster Boy. Not much is known about his private life, but his act is impossible to forget. Laurel turned a neck twist into a career that lasted decades. No illusions, no tricks, just a man turning his body in ways that weren't supposed to happen and making history doing it. Number 2. Zelda Rubenstein. Zelda was born in 1933 and grew up in Pittsburgh, the daughter of Jewish immigrants. A rare pituitary condition affected her growth, and by adulthood she stood just 4 feet 3 inches tall. Her height made her different, but her presence made her unforgettable. For over 20 years she worked quietly as a lab technician, until one day in her mid-40s she chose to start acting. And then came Poltergeist. She played the unforgettable spiritual medium, a role that became her signature and opened doors for the rest of her life. Zelda was magnetic, quirky, fierce, mysterious, and deeply human. She often played characters rooted in that same odd but real energy, appearing in 16 Candles, Picket Fences, and narrating The Scariest Places on Earth. She turned what others saw as a limitation into a career of power, emotion, and true individuality. Zelda never shrank from herself. She leaned into her voice, her body, her weirdness, and left behind a legend only she could have written. Now guys, let's end this with Number 1. Millie and Christine McCoy. Millie and Christine, known as the Two-Headed Nightingale, were born conjoined in 1851 while their parents were enslaved in North Carolina. Joined at the lower spine and positioned at a 90-degree angle, they became a spectacle before they could even walk. Sold at just 10 months old to showman John Purvis, they were leased out for exhibitions and later resold to other promoters. Despite exploitation, the twins developed extraordinary talents. Millie sang alto, Christine sang soprano, and toured internationally as performers. Their motto was, "As God decreed, we agreed," embodying resilience in the face of exploitation. When the Emancipation Proclamation freed them in 1863, they took control of their lives, learned 5 languages, and eventually purchased property. Even with their rare condition, they built a legacy of courage and artistry. Millie died first at 61, and Christine followed 12 hours later. 2 lives intertwined, 2 voices harmonized, one unshakable story of survival. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you soon in the next one.